Welcome to Grown As Men, a perspective podcast on everything from the last generation of unashamed men. I grew up in a world where respect was earned, responsibility mattered, and the sentence, "we're trillions of dollars in national debt," would have made any American politician shit their pants. In the last video, we watched Senator Rand Paul perfectly illustrate the incompetence of modern American government right there on the Senate floor. This is part 3, the final installment, picking up exactly where he left off with a stark warning of how our current U.S. spending habits are simply unsustainable, according to basic, non-partisan, and yes, non-racist mathematics.
Just 2 weeks ago, a majority of the Republican caucus actually did vote for my 6-penny plan. The penny plan, as I've said, is to cut spending across the board. It's how we would actually finally balance the budget, is this compromise that everything needs a little bit of a haircut. Unfortunately, we've got no Democrat support for it, but we also have gotten about a third. We got a little over half the caucus, but probably a little over a third, 40% of the caucus is still believing that we should just keep spending levels as they are or continue to increase spending. So we're not quite there yet. There's not quite enough fear of where we are. But 30.
And here's what people don't realize, that like, okay, if you had half of Republicans in Congress and half of Democrats in Congress, or even 2/3 and 1/4 or something around there, like, you know, two-thirds and 2/3 of each, it passes. Easy. It passes. But because people want to play games, right? The whole goal is to make Republicans look bad here. That's the whole goal, is what you have to realize, why you're not getting any votes from the Democratic Party. And it's not a left or right thing. Republicans have done this in the past as well. This is why there's been shutdowns under both parties. But that's what's happening right now. We can't change the past. That is what's happening right now. If you could just get 2/3 of the Democrats in Congress to go for this, it'd pass. It'd pass, and we'd be on our way to fiscal conservatism.
$7 trillion in debt is not something to be sneezed at. You know, we're adding at $2 trillion a year. The interest alone is about $1 trillion. Some people have made the argument that a country can no longer remain strong when its interest payment on its debt exceeds its actual spending to defend itself, the military spending. So I think we're really at a tipping point. Everybody comes to us for money. Everybody's got their hand out. Everybody wants more out of us, you know, from Israel to Israel's neighbors. Everybody's got their hand out. Everybody wants more money from us. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes no sense for us to be borrowing it from China to give it to other countries, no matter how good the request is. So the plans that have been presented before us, we had 2 plans presented, a Republican plan and a Democrat plan. Which one adds debt? Yes, both of them. The Republican plan will add $2 trillion in debt next year if we continue spending at the same level. The Democrat plan said we want another trillion on top of that, so it would be a $3 trillion deficit next year.
Good Lord.
So neither party is serious about this, but there is an alternative when we get enough Republicans, and that's the penny plan that I've been offering for several years. It balances it by gradually reducing spending just a little bit each year. But by supporting yet another continuing resolution at the current spending levels, Republicans are essentially signing off on the fiscal policies of the Biden administration. Policies Republicans once rightly opposed. Just a short time ago, virtually every Republican was saying the Biden spending levels were too high. But given that this continuing resolution will add another $2 trillion deficit next year, this plan, the Biden level, should be a non-starter. However, the legislation before us today is being presented as a solution to dysfunction, but in reality is just papering over the cracks. This measure is not a reversal of the status quo. It is the status quo. It does nothing to address our debt. It does nothing to divert our trajectory that is bankrupting this nation. This is not some theoretical debate. This is math. This is what will happen. This is what happened last year and is going to happen again. $2 trillion in additional debt. We bring in about $4.7 trillion. We send $6.7 trillion. We're spending $2 trillion more than comes in. This isn't like an emergency. This isn't even the excuse of the pandemic. This is routine business, routine status quo, $2 trillion in deficit every year.
I don't think people understand how much $1 trillion is? It's 1,000 billions. And 1 billion is 1,000 millions. Does that put anything into perspective? I don't even know what $1 trillion would look like in a stack of like hundreds. I mean, it's just crazy.
And if we stay on this path, if we keep spending like we did during the pandemic or under the Biden administration, we are guaranteeing a future of higher inflation and crippling debt for our children and grandchildren. We're running out of ways to fix this. We're running out of time. The CBO projects that within the next 10 years, that mandatory spending, this is all the welfare programs, and interest alone will exceed revenue. We're getting pretty close to that now. So think about that. We vote on a budget that's not mandatory spending. Military spending is considered to be discretionary, and then there's a bunch of discretionary welfare. Military is a little bit more than the welfare. That's the budget we vote on. But then you have mandatory spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and then interest on the debt. That essentially is equal to what comes in. The taxes that are coming in equal the mandatory spending. So when we actually do produce a budget, which isn't very often, the stuff we are spending is almost entirely borrowed. So if you look at the discretionary spending budget, it's about $1.8, $1.9 trillion. That's the debt. That's what the debt is. The debt is essentially equivalent to the discretionary spending. So the mandatory programs, the welfare programs have gotten so big and they grow with such abundance each year, and we've added in healthy, young, healthy, able-bodied people to these programs that really shouldn't be on welfare. You've added these people in, and it's consuming all of your taxes.
And that's another thing people need to realize is these government welfare programs expand. What does it do? It produces jobs, right? So this is what inflates the job numbers that we saw under the Biden administration, where everybody's like, look, he created so many jobs. They're all government jobs. These were government jobs, a lot of them under bureaucracies. And it doesn't actually, it's not the same as like creating jobs in the private sector, right? Jobs that actually create real revenue in tax dollars for the government. So it's just more spending.
There's really, everything else is being borrowed. Entitlement programs and interest will consume every single dollar within a year or two that comes.
Sorry, and that just quick, add on to that, and that's not including the actual benefits that we're giving out to the people who we're expanding benefits for, right? Like he said, young, able-bodied people getting benefits. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the nightmare horror stories on TikTok, people crying because their benefits went bye-bye because, they were getting $8,000 in food stamps. I don't even know, what do you need $8,000 a month for in food? Like, my family doesn't eat, how many kids do you have? What are you, raising a school? We don't spend $8,000. We don't spend $8,000 a month, period. We don't have $8,000 a month to spend.
Comes in tax revenue. Imagine if you were running your household that way. No money left for food, clothing, shelter unless you take out a loan every single year forever. That's what we're doing. You really can't live that way. You can borrow if you want to borrow to buy a house, but the bank holds the house. But you don't borrow money to pay rent for your apartment. You don't borrow money to pay for your groceries. You have to actually earn that money and have enough for your daily living expenses. We're to the point where we're borrowing for the daily living expenses of government. My amendment that I have offered to this would take the automatic renewal that prevents us from shutting down, take the automatic renewal and put in the penny plan numbers, so what you would actually have is not running the government at the same level, at the Biden levels. You would actually reduce spending by 6%. I'm fine to make it automatic. I'm fine to let it kick in and go on so we don't shut the government down and we avoid the chaos and the the discomfort of having government shut down, but we shouldn't keep spending the same amount of money. That would be like abdicating our duty just to spend the same amount. But if we were to use my penny plan budget, we would be returning to pre-pandemic spending levels, a significant cut, and it would put us on the path to balancing our budget within 5 years. The government, though, has lost sight of its priorities. The American people are the ones paying the price. The big spenders don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you that it's all borrowed. They don't tell you that you're being ripped off by inflation. They don't tell you that, well, gosh, we're going to give you all this stuff, but it has a cost. Really, nothing really is free in life. There is really not any possibility of getting something for nothing. What you get from government through borrowed money, you pay for through inflated prices. Mm-hmm. The inflation of the Biden years didn't go away. Over the last 3 or 4
We've seen that, right? Time over, or year over year, right? The more we borrow, the more we borrow. I mean, think about where, I don't know, maybe where rent was just a few years ago. When I got out of the military in 2013, that year we were paying rent, I believe it was $1,400 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. Those very same apartments, if I go on there and look, and I have in recent years, are over $3,500 a month. It's insane. And that's not the only thing, right? Just think about, everything, what you're paying for goods. I mean, cars. The first car I bought, brand new car, was I think $11,000. It's a brand new car. And now we're talking like you can't get one brand new and it not being in like pretty much the high 25s. It's crazy.
4 years in the grocery store, a lot of the meat and the different items in the grocery store went up 20%. When they say inflation is slowing down, that means we're just not adding more to it. But if you don't make 20% more than you made 4 years ago, you're being ripped off. You're being ripped off by inflation.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that my colleagues, at least on this side of the aisle, stood united in opposition to this fiscal recklessness. It wasn't that long ago that we drew a line in the sand on debt and the debt ceiling, that we demanded spending caps, that we said we wouldn't mortgage our children's future to fund today's political convenience. Now some seem content to roll over and lock in the very policies that we ran against. I won't do that. And I won't urge my colleagues to do that either. We can't claim to be fiscal conservatives while voting for more and more debt. We can't claim to be this great opposition to the Biden spending levels and then vote the Biden spending levels in.
It's important to note, what he said, you can't claim to be fiscal conservatives. The Republican Party right now, and I'm all for it on a wide array of social issues. It has become this kind of wide umbrella where you've seen a lot of moderates come over in the last year to maybe even 10, I don't know. But, as the left starts to become more socially extreme, moderates start to come over here, or at least leave the Democratic Party and go independent. But many are coming over to the Republican side. With that, maybe you get this, maybe that's what happens is you get this kind of mindset of not being fiscally conservative, fiscally responsible, because the Republican Party, has always been that way, always been fiscally conservative. And again, you could go back to Abraham Lincoln, right? People will bring up that and say, well, he spent so much on the Reconstruction after the Civil War. He did it unwillingly, not unwillingly. He knew he had to do it, right? But he didn't want to do it. He was torn over doing it. And so, it's always been the party of fiscal conservatism. But I think you're seeing that less and less, every election. And I don't know. I don't know what you can attribute it to, but that's just a theory of mine that maybe because as you see more of these moderates or left of center Democrats come over to the Republican Party and it becoming this wider umbrella, then that's kind of what comes along with it. But either way, it's just not sustainable. I think, if anything, if there's any facet of conservatism that we should all agree on, it should be fiscally. because that will benefit all of us, and it will also destroy all of us if we're not. It will just keep putting us, raising prices and causing inflation, and life is just going to continue to get more and more expensive. And we're going to keep voting in people that don't care about fixing the issue and wonder, why is it getting more expensive? Right here, what he's telling you is why.
We can't claim to not like deficit spending and then vote for spending that will inevitably lead to another $2 trillion in debt next year. This country can't afford to write another blank check. We can't afford to lock in the fiscal mistakes of the past. We need real reform. We need it now. We need to return to the principles of limited constitutional government. If we obeyed the Constitution, most of the nonsense, most of the spending that goes on up here really isn't authorized under the Constitution. What
did I tell you? True constitutionalist right here. A true constitutionalist. That's why I love Rand Paul, but we'll never elect him. America's stupid.
Return to the Constitution, the principles of limited government, responsible budgeting, and economic freedom, we'd have a balanced budget again. We need to start today.
All right. So that's it, guys. That was the video. I hope it was informative to you. I mean, it's something I would come to expect. Like I said, I've been following Rand Paul for a while. I've admired him for a while because he really doesn't care if he rocks the boat, so to speak. It's not what he goes in intending to do, but he is a true constitutionalist. And that's why I admire him. I think he'd be a great president, despite the fact that he's not so charismatic, right? Like, you're not going to go and be like, oh, wow, that speech he gave was amazing. But he's going to give it to you straight. He's going to give you facts, and he's going to give you solutions. And that's, I think, what we should vote on. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. Anyways, that'll do it for this one, guys. Be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're not afraid of authentic conversation, then smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs to hear it. I'm Ronnie. This is Grown as Men. And until next time, stay grounded and stay vocal.